restroom or anything like that. It was horrible. I remember my knees and my feet for standing for long periods of time, and the mats would never be changed out. Like, the hyper efficiency will run you down to almost nothing, believe it or not.
I believe you, Michael. I appreciate the call to Radio Times. Chris, going back to you and going back to warehouse workers, you say when there are complaints or even talks about unionizing, it is largely about working conditions, correct?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, Amazon famously said we're going to raise the bar, we're going to raise wages $15 an hour. And depending on what part of the country, it can be a lot higher. I saw jobs in their Edison, New Jersey fulfillment center. They're offering up to $22 an hour there and a $1,000 signing bonus. That's how desperate they are for people to come work at some of these fulfillment centers. But when workers were organizing, even before what happened in Alabama with the attempt to unionize that fulfillment center in Shakopee, Minnesota, when workers were walking out, they just said, hey, like, we want more breaks. And, and a lot of them were immigrants and they were Muslim, and they were like, we want the opportunity to pray because this is really important to us. And Amazon is not set up that way. It's a very performance-driven culture, and it's management by algorithm. So if you are too long off task, if you're taking too many breaks, the algorithm is going to notice, and your human boss might come along and say, oh, I'm here to help you out and help train you and everything, but ultimately you're answering to a piece of software. So, there's no mercy there.
I appreciate the call to Radio Times. You write about a place called Fulfillment Center Alley in Pennsylvania. Where is that?
So if you imagine kind of the corridor, roughly correlating with maybe the Appalachian Trail, of areas where there's enough highways and enough, people who need jobs, but it's within an hour or two's drive of the major population centers on the East Coast. That's Fulfillment Center Alley on that side of the country. And tons and tons of companies, everybody who wants to deliver things to you online, which is everybody now, sets up their big e-commerce fulfillment centers there and sort of competes with each other for labor, whether it's Amazon or Walmart or Chewy or Lowe's or any of them.
We have a bunch of comments here. They're all pretty much about the same thing. Elizabeth says what we really need to do is curb global warming, is to stop shopping. Olivia says, can you comment on the environmental impact of shipping all these products around the world? A tweet from Ivan, I shop sparingly online because of the ethical problems of the process and the companies involved. Christine says most of the supply chain runs on oil, which is so damaging to climate. There's a chance of getting more renewables into the mix. I mean, these are people who probably don't shop online or don't do it very much, and they have problems with the system. Do you too as well, Chris? Especially after having spent some time really doing this deep dive.
Yeah, one thing I hope people take away from this book is that, there are when something gets delivered to you, every time it is a miracle. If you could have ridden along on the journey that thing traveled, it would just absolutely floor you. And it has made me want to buy less and make things last longer, and it has made me much more conscientious about where things come from. That said, I know that so many of us are busy, we're pressed for time, people are rushing to get their kids to school and get to work, and we all just need, we're using species, we need things in our life, so we just pick up whatever is at hand, whatever is affordable, whether that's from Amazon or Walmart or wherever. But I do think that we kind of can and should be more collectively conscientious about this thing. We should be limiting our consumption. We should keep in mind that these systems are really designed to tap into our most primitive reptilian brain, where it's so convenient to just click buy now. That's the whole point. That's why the system was designed the way it was.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's so convenient, right? And it's just this click away, which is so easy to do without even thinking. But you're saying what? Think, pause before you click?
Yeah, absolutely. Put it in your shopping cart, give it a week, see if you still really need it, see if there's something you can reuse as an alternative. Because what the commenter who said much of the supply chain runs on oil is absolutely right. For a lot of this stuff, there is no alternative. If it came to you on a ship, that ship burned bunker fuel. It is the dirtiest fossil fuel you can burn, aside from maybe coal. There's just no way around it. National trucks are not going to get electrified anytime soon. The physics just don't work. So, the further away something came from, the larger its impact on the environment. There's no way around it.
We're almost out of time here. You mentioned miracle, and just because you've got something in the case of this USB charger that starts in a factory in Vietnam, and lo and behold, ends up on someone's front door.
Yeah. I mean, as I said before, it's a 14,000-mile, multi-month journey with just untold amounts of automation, robotics, and humans, some of whom were really kind of pushing themselves to the limit in order to get that one single, tiny, absolutely mundane item to you.
I want to end with a comment from Carol to you, Christopher Mims. She says, I just want to shout out Christopher's great technology reporting. I love his columns.
Well, I really appreciate that.
Well, we appreciate you joining us on Radio Times. Christopher Mims, thanks so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. He's technology columnist for the Wall Street Journal. And again, we've been talking about his new book. It's called Arriving Today, From Factory to Front Door, Why Everything Has Changed About How and What We Buy. Go to WHYY.org and look for Radio Times under programs. You can always download a podcast of the show wherever you get your podcasts. You can always continue this conversation on our Facebook page. Diana Martinez, the engineer for today's edition of Radio Times, the show produced by Debbie Builder and Paige Murray Bessler. I'm Marty Moscow-Wayne. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for those calls and comments. Thanks for joining us today. Up next, it's 1A. If you missed any portion of today's show, you can tune in tonight at 11 o'clock right here on WHYY. And you can always download a podcast of the show wherever you get your podcasts. Have a great weekend and join us Monday for the Radio Times Regional Roundup.
Supporting WHYY, Impriano Roofing, Siding, and Windows, family-owned and operated, committed to quality and service for nearly 5 decades. Impriano.com or 610-644-4444. Impriano, the best homes have an Impriano roof.
Supporting WHYY, East Passyunk Avenue Business Improvement District, welcoming you to shop local in South Philly. With over 160 small businesses, boutiques, restaurants, books, plants, and more. More online at visiteastpassyunk.com.
This is WHYY FM Philadelphia, WNJN FM 89.7 Atlantic City, WNJZ 90.3 Cape May Courthouse, WNJB FM 89.3 Bridgeton, WNJM 89.9 Manahawkin, and WNJS FM 88.1 Berlin.
There she is. She's beauty, she's grace, and she also might be slowly fading into obscurity. From WAMU and NPR in Washington, this is 1A. Hi, I'm Jen White. Today on 1A, Parade or Charade? The Miss America pageant turned 100 this year. But there are growing questions about how relevant it is and what it tells us about how women are treated today. We'll revisit Miss America's history, look at its present, and consider its future, and we'll hear from 3 contestants who went on to wear the crown. There's plenty from you too, but today we are on tape and we'll get started after these headlines from NPR.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Windsor Johnston. Top health officials in the United States say they're scrambling to learn more about a new variant of the coronavirus first detected in South Africa. NPR's Michaeline Duquette reports the strain has a much higher number of mutations than previous variants and is spreading rapidly.
Some of those mutations are known to help the virus evade the immune system by avoiding antibodies. Some are known to increase transmissibility. But what all these mutations do together is not known. And the big concern is that these mutations could make the vaccines even less effective than Delta did. But it's really not known yet at all.
That's NPR's Michaeline Duquette reporting. Concerns about the new variant of the coronavirus are prompting a number of countries to impose travel restrictions. The United Kingdom is temporarily banning flights from South Africa and several other African nations. Japan says it will block flights from 6 African countries. NPR's Anthony Kuhn reports business travelers from those areas will now be required to quarantine upon arrival in Japan.
Chief Cabinet Secretary Hirokazu Matsuno told reporters that travelers from the 6 nations will need to quarantine for 10 days at a government-designated facility upon arrival. The restrictions take effect Saturday and cover travelers who've recently been in Botswana, Eswatini, Lesotho, Namibia, South Africa, or Zimbabwe. Matsuno added that no cases of the new variant have been confirmed yet in Japan. Japan's Nikkei stock average slumped to its lowest level in a month on news of the new variant. Japan has fully vaccinated 76% of its population. Case numbers are way down, but the government is already bracing for a new wave of infections as the holiday season approaches. Anthony Kuhn, NPR News, Seoul.
U.S. companies with vaccine mandates say they're making progress in getting the vast majority of their employees vaccinated. As NPR's Andrea Hsu reports, that includes the federal government.
This week was the deadline for some 3.5 million federal workers to get vaccinated. The White House reported that more than 90% have gotten at least one dose. At the state level, Connecticut Governor Ned Lamont announced that more than 90% of K-12 school employees are fully vaccinated. And in the private sector, the Walt Disney Company reported that more than 90% of its active cast members in Florida had been vaccinated. But Disney paused its requirement for theme park workers after the Florida legislature banned vaccine mandates. Under the law signed by Governor Ron DeSantis, companies now face hefty fines for requiring the vaccine. Andrea Hsu, NPR News.
Stocks are trading sharply lower on Wall Street. The Dow was down 967 points. This is NPR.
Live from Philadelphia, this is WHYY News. It's 11:04. Good morning. I'm Priyanka Tiwari. Medicare open enrollment is going on until December 7th. Consumer advocates warn seniors should be on the lookout for scammers as they pick out health coverage for the coming year. Antoinette Cross of the Pennsylvania Health Access Network says one scam centers on false advertising.
It's usually a service that you don't really need. Sometimes it's actually a service that's covered already by Medicare, and it just sounds like a great deal to get this extra supplemental insurance, but it's really not necessary.
Another scam, sometimes criminals pose as Medicare representatives or insurance brokers over the phone to acquire Medicare ID numbers and other sensitive information. Legitimate entities do not cold call enrollees. If people need help, they can get free Medicare counseling by contacting their local area agency on aging. Hunters in Pennsylvania are being urged to be vaccinated against COVID-19. The reason? They might get infected from a deer. For WHYY, Megan Frank reports.
A report from Penn State University found 80% of white-tailed deer in Iowa tested positive for COVID last year. Researcher and biology professor Suresh Kuchipudi says the study showed that humans are spreading the disease to deer.
We have the situation where there is still a transmission of virus among human beings, which is creating opportunities for the virus to evolve, possibilities of novel variants to emerge, which means that the evolution of the virus is now twice as complex.
Kuchipudi says animals like deer serve as a type of reservoir for the virus, and that means animals could carry the virus indefinitely. And he says that's why it's important for people who are around deer frequently, like hunters, to be vaccinated and wear a mask. In Bethlehem, I'm Megan Frank.
It's 46 degrees, cloudy and windy in Center City, Philadelphia at 11:06. You're listening to WHYY.
Support for NPR comes from Little Passports. available as a gift to inspire the imagination. A subscription offers activities, science projects, and stories designed to fuel kids' curiosity about the world around them. More at littlepassports.com.
This is 1A. I'm Jen White in Washington. When it comes to pop culture in the 1920s, there are a couple of things that have stuck with us. There's Mickey Mouse and the Miss America pageant.
Atlantic City, New Jersey bubbles with excitement as the Miss America pageant attracts the cream of the nation's feminine pulchritude. State contest finalists from all over the country compete for the coveted title, Miss America. Take your pick.
The pageant turns 100 today, and for some, that's 100 years too long. But today we'll talk about the institution and its evolving place in the American consciousness and whether it has a future. Joining us now is Amy Artgetzinger. She's an editor for the Style section of the Washington Post. She's also the author of a new book called There She Was, The Secret History of Miss America. Amy, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
So let's just start with the origin story of Miss America. How did the pageant begin?
It was really just supposed to be a sideshow. In 1921, the business owners of Atlantic City, which was then one of the most popular beach resorts on the East Coast, they decided to try to extend the summer season past Labor Day. And they did this with the Fall Frolic. This was supposed to be the East Coast equivalent of Mardi Gras. Everyone dressed up in costumes or in swimsuits, lots of dancing and festivals. And one of the draws for it was supposed to be this beauty pageant, where they drew the most beautiful girls from Washington and Pittsburgh and Camden and Philadelphia, places all within a train ride of Atlantic City, to the Intercity Beauty Contest. And as it happened, this beauty contest, which was just supposed to be a sideshow, ended up becoming the main event. And it really, a cultural juggernaut that went on for 100 years now.
Well, throughout the book, you explore these existential questions that have surrounded the pageant from the very beginning. Questions like what the competition should be, what a woman should be. What did that look like in 1921?
You know, in 1921, there were a number of sophisticated young women who came in for this contest. One of them was Miss New York, who was already a model and an actress who had had some roles in silent films. But the contestant from Washington, D.C. was a young woman named Margaret Orman, who was still a high school student. The legend has it that when the newspaper reporters came to tell her she was Miss Washington, that she was playing marbles in the dirt with her friends. Just a kid, in other words. And she ended up winning. She ended up prevailing over the more sophisticated young women in this contest, who were really only a couple years older than her. And arguably it's because she was the most girlish. She wore her hair long, as opposed to the flappers who were bobbing their hair. She wore a very demure, old-fashioned swimsuit at a time that women were beginning to wear knit suits that were much clingier. And there is a perception that at this point, America, or at least Atlantic City, was looking to reward an old-fashioned girl. This was a time of a lot of cultural anxiety. World War I had just ended. The great flu pandemic, of course. The culture was modernizing, and young people were acting out more. They were going off and doing stuff in their cars. They were partying. They were drinking. And so it made sense in some ways that the business owners, the establishment community would want to reward someone who seemed to represent the old times.
Well, who was setting that standard at the beginning of the pageant?
Well, it's an interesting mix. It was, on the one hand, it was the business community, the people who owned the hotels and the restaurants, but they also brought in judges who were kind of a diverse bunch, including, one of the great magazine cover artists of the day, Howard Chandler Christie. In fact, it's believed that he might have been the reason why Miss New York, the sophisticated film actress, did not win. He had a long-standing professional relationship with her. She had been one of his top models. And at the very last minute, before they awarded the crown, they had determined that Miss New York did not qualify because she was a professional beauty and not an amateur beauty. But of course, this was, men, upper middle class, white, certain age. That's who was making these decisions.
Well, let's fast forward to 1950. Here's a TV promo from that year.
Musical ability is one criterion in the talent contest, but the judges have a hard time picking the best voices out of 53 figures like these. The field is squared off at 16 pervacious finalists. The winner is brown-haired, brown-eyed Yolandi Bettis, 21 of Mobile, Alabama.
So it's a little cringy to listen to. You say 1950 was a turning point for the pageant, though. What happened?
It was, and I'm glad that you pointed out. Can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad you pointed out 1950. Yolanda Bettis, the Miss Alabama who won that year.
How much time left in my camera?
She was a very ambitious young woman. She wanted a foreman career. And of course she won in part because of the swimsuit competition. But after she won, she announced that she was done with swimsuit competitions. She refused to pose in a swimsuit for Catalina, who was a major sponsor of the pageant.